to revisit areas which it was conveniently thought had been solved, that all questions had been answered, is now open to serious questioning. This substratum of investigative stuff really attempts to puncture illusions and fraudulent interpretations of history.
And I was in that wonderful institution, the Mitchell Library in Sydney, and I came across there, understandably the Australians are kind of interested in convicts and transportation, and they have a vast collection on convicts and transportation, and I came across an astonishing book. It was very old, very obscure, and it amazed me. It told of how women were in the 18th and 17th centuries were, and children too, were shipped and sold in America. And I'd never heard of this. I'd never heard of details. And while this only told a bit of the story, it disturbed me and encouraged me and horrified me. So I thought, great story here. I came back to England with the photocopy of this book, and he will tell you what happened there.
Well, I suppose that I'm Laurel to Mike's Hardy, in that it was another fine mess he got me into. In that I read the photocopies of what he had brought back, and what he brought back was photocopies of a book written by a man called Abbott Emerson Smith, who had written about how women, mainly prostitutes, but all sorts of other people as well, who were taken out of the Bridewell prison in London in the early 1600s and sent off to the new colonies in America as brides for the planters, if you like. So these were women of marriageable age or of breeding age or whatever, who would be sent off, because up until then, of course, you had a brand new colony, it was all men, and for this to become viable, they needed women. And this seemed to be an astonishing thing, and so it went from there. And when we looked at this and thought, well, this is just the tip of something. This is actually the edge of something here. And so the very fact that these women were taken out of the penal system in Britain, in England, and sent off to the new colonies with no say for themselves about whether or not they went or not. So the interesting thing was, what was it they were going into? What was it that was already there that these people could just be taken out and shipped 3,000 miles away? And so we started to look at what this possibly could mean and what the wider context was of that. And that's how it began.
And we unearthed a wider and wider story. We found it wasn't just women, it was children, it was convicts, it was prisoners of war, it was all sorts. It was also people who signed up as indentured servants to get to America free of, they didn't have to pay the passage, the poor. They would be contracted, indentured by merchants and by captains and by planters' agents to go to America free, in return for which they gave up their rights to their labour for several years. It was supposed to be, according to history, it's 4 or 5 years. In fact, it could be as many as 12. And what they didn't realise was that they were signing away all their rights, and they had become chattels. They were used as property, regarded as property. Now, as we began to investigate this, and we used all the kind of resources that investigators do. We look at every kind of book, every kind of official report, etc., diaries, letters. We realised it was an enormous story, and it was also something which refuted one of the key ideas of the development of slavery, which is that in 1619 slavery began in America with the arrival of 20 and odd Negroes, as they were called, sold, according to accounts, by a Dutch captain to planters in England, and this was where slavery began. Well, it wasn't true. Slavery had begun earlier. Children and women and convicts had been sold earlier than that, and although a small number of Africans were subsequently brought to Virginia and sold over the next decades, only very few, only 300. Only very few, only 350 years later. Oh, sorry, 20 years later. But meantime, hundreds, thousands of poor whites were being brought in, and on various convicts and children, etc., and they were being enslaved. And they were being enslaved.